Hello, everybody. Welcome to this live Q&A with the Chancellor on the back of the cost of living crisis announcements that he made today. Now, I've only got 15 minutes, so I'm not going to do a big introduction. Chancellor, welcome. You're at a B&Q,
Hi,
are
Martin.
you?
I am at a B&Q. I've just been spending some time talking to lots of the employees here, actually. It's been great.
So I thought I'd start, before I get into the questions from money savers that I've had today, why don't you just set out briefly what the announcements you've made are?
Well, thanks for that opportunity, and I will be brief. And the first thing I'd say to everyone is, look, I know things are difficult at the moment, and many people watching right now are going to be worried about the next few months. And that's why we've announced £15 billion of new support to help with the cost of living, with the most vulnerable third of households in our country receiving around £1,200 of help. There's also support available for everyone, because we said we would stand by the British people, and today that's exactly what we've done.
And that is converting the £200 loan, not loan, as I call it, you don't call it, into a £400 grant that will be spread across 6 months, and that'll be non-repayable and off all bills.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So if you're in a typical household, you've already probably received, or should be shortly receiving, the £150 council tax rebate that we announced in February and was delivered broadly over April and this month. And then in October, for the months thereafter, you're going to get £400 delivered through your energy bills. And that is a combination of, as you said, the old scheme that we had announced, the £200, which I called a rebate spreading the cost. And you raised with me, actually, the confusion that people had around that. And look, the facts have changed, right? When we put that in place, there was an expectation that energy prices would go up and come back down, and that repayment would be more than offset by the fact that energy prices had fallen. But that doesn't obviously look like it's the case now. So I've listened to your concerns and the concerns of other people, turned that into a full grant and doubled it. So it's £400 of help for everyone, on top of the £150 that they should have already received. So that's £550 for a typical family of support over this period to help them with the cost of living.
And I think that's a good move. That loan, not loan was very unpopular. I'm going to get on to some specific questions that I've had in. There's a couple here. One from T.S. Halloumi. Can you ask Rishi why he's not forcing energy companies to reduce their tariffs, reduce the cap, and stop normalising these extortionate prices? A grant is just going straight back to energy companies. There won't be one next year when prices are still high. And Tom Kivlin. How is applying a windfall tax and giving us all a grant of £400 more economically efficient than just forcing the energy firms to lower their prices in the first place? And lots of people saying in France, they're not rising by more than 4 or 5%. So why are we doing it this way? Why are we allowing this to happen?
So there are a couple of different things there and some good questions. So the tax that we're putting in place, the energy profits levy, is a levy on the oil and gas industry that's producing domestically, and as people rightly have said, are making at the moment quite extraordinary profits, partly as a result of a war that Russia has started. Now, we wanted to find a way to tax those profits fairly, but also incentivize investment. And I'm not one of these people who thinks that that's the instinctive lever that you should reach for, because I do care about investment in our economy to improve our energy security. But I was pragmatic about it. So our levy means that we can tax those profits, but we can do so in a way that supports investment, which is good for our country long term. And that's why we took the time to get that right. And then we are using some of that money to help, all of that money to get back to people through discounts. Now, I think the other question that they were asking is about energy generation, and that's something that's slightly different. And they're also right. And we believe that in that part of the space, there are probably also windfall type profits being made. And what I said today is we're urgently analysing how big they are and then what the appropriate things to do. And as your viewers,
but Chancellor, the crux of these questions, forgive me, the crux of these questions is, why don't we just keep energy prices low? Why don't we regulate and say the cap should not go up? Many of these energy firms are vertically integrated, so they're oil and gas generators themselves. Why don't you just keep the prices the same?
So we do have an independent regulator who does exactly that. And we do have a price cap. Many other countries didn't have a price cap, and we did have a price cap. Now, with regard to electricity generation, We have said that we will reform the market in a similar way to what some of other European countries have done. That will take a bit of time, which is why I said today I'm urgently looking at the best way to do that in advance of those reforms happening. So I'm actually sympathetic, as you always said, to the idea that that market isn't working as well as we want it to work. And we can go into it complicated reasons, but these people providing electricity are getting to sell that electricity at the very high prices of natural gas, not the cost of what it costs them to produce the electricity. Now that isn't ideal. We want to see how we can fix that. That's what some other countries have done. And I said today that we're looking urgently at how to do that so that we can bring prices down.
Well, yes, I mean, I think the independent regulators one's always difficult because the independent regulators price cap was one that was government mandated on a structure that they have to follow the wholesale prices. So they're only doing what you told them. They're not necessarily independent within that. And you're right, though, the market is broken. I mean, this was meant to be a market about competition, but no one can switch and save. I mean, there are no cheaper tariffs than the price cap. There might be a few fixes worth it when you look a year ahead. So the market is broken, but I'm going to move on because I've only got limited time. I want to look at a couple of missed groups now. So the first question, I get ESA contributions based on PIP as a lifelong neurological condition, which has left me wheelchair bound. But because I'm contribution-based ESA, which for those who don't know, is a benefit you get a bit like an extension of statutory sick pay, as long as you made national insurance contributions, I don't get the £650. And another very similar from Emma Brandrick, please reconsider ignoring those on carers allowance in your help. Yet again, even for those of us who can work, our earnings are capped, our stress is high, and our bills have gone up too. We, and she's right, we saved the government millions by caring. Please help us now, there's a crisis. So contributory ESA and carers allowance, why aren't they getting the 650 quid you're giving to 8 million people on benefits like universal credit and other legacy benefits?
Very simply, because our existing system is the best guide we have to those who are most in need. And those just over 8 million households are those that are in receipt of what we call means-tested benefits, which means that their needs have been assessed by the state, by the government, through the system as getting extra government support. And that was actually where most of the calls for help were. For those, the most vulnerable groups were the ones on means-tested benefits. And we have comprehensively ensured that entire population will receive £650 of extra support. And that comes on top of the £400 that we just talked about, and likely the £150 of council tax, bringing it up to £1,200 of support for that very large population. That's a third, almost a third of all UK households will receive that level of support. So it's pretty substantial. Now, I accept there's always going to be other people who feel that they should get support as well. We put some extra support in place, for example, for those who receive disability benefits. So that's also there. Now, what I'd say about... because
that was something that I was pushing you to do.
Exactly, that's something you and I had spoken about, and you were right to raise it. And I'm glad that today that we can have a top-up payment to, again, just ease the burden on some of those costs. Now, with carers allowance, again, it's not a means-tested benefit, so it is different. But what I can tell you is roughly about, I think that, well, actually, more than half, the majority of people on carers allowance also are in receipt or in a household with someone on means-tested benefits or a pensioner, which means they will get either the £650 or the £300 for pensioners. So actually, the majority of people in carers allowance will get those other things. And when they're on, if their incomes are low and they do need extra help from the state and they're on universal credit, actually their universal credit payment is higher than someone else's to reflect the fact that they are a carer. But in all cases, what I would say is that we've also created a discretionary fund. Again, Martin, that's always something you talk to me about when you say, look, there are always going to be cases of individual circumstances that no government policy can perfectly anticipate or cover. And that's why it's right to have discretionary funding for councils to help those that in particular circumstances need that little bit of extra help. We announced an extra £500 million today, topping up that fund that we've already created. So if you're in that circumstance and for whatever reason you're not getting the help that you think you should, you can talk to your council, and we've provided them with some extra money to do that.
So just one more in that category before I move on to a bit of a broader one. Now, this one comes from the disability charity Leonard Cheshire. Are you proposing to remove 300,000? Are you still proposing to remove 300,000 disabled people from the warm home discount scheme? If so, then the £150 for PIP and DLA claimants only covers this loss and offers no increase for disabled people during this cost of living crisis. So are you giving with one hand and taking away with another, Chancellor?
No, I mean, the Warms Home discount scheme operates completely separately from everything that I've announced today. And that's a scheme that's been in place for a long time.
No, but there is a change so that people with disabilities are being removed from it. So you're giving them £150, but they're losing the warm home discount as well.
In aggregate, what's happening with the Warm Homes discount program is it is being expanded by, I think, about 700,000 people from memory, up to 3 million households. Now, again, that's something that I'm not directly responsible for, but in general, the coverage of the Warm Homes discount is increasing rather than decreasing. And that's something that everyone funds. So I'm sure your viewers will know this. The Warm Homes discount means that everyone on their bills pays a bit extra to support those who are in that category. And that's why there's a balance there. But as I said, in general, it's increasing, but I'm not the one precisely responsible for determining how it is increasing.
Chancellor, I've had many representations from disabled people who are very worried about losing the warm home discount. The Leonard Cheshire charity is a good, strong campaigning charity. Could I ask you to look again, or even for you or somebody in the DWP to meet the Leonard Cheshire charity to discuss the fact the net gain for those 300,000 people is zero in this case. So what you're giving them, they're losing with the warm home discount. Could I ask that while we're on air?
Again, Martin, I'm sure that I can make sure that they're in touch with the people who are responsible for the warm homes discount and have that conversation, and I will make sure that happens.
Well, we'll make sure that goes through some back channels. Let me move on to perhaps one of the biggest categories, which is those people who don't qualify for universal credit, but are just above that level. Victoria Gunturn on Facebook: what help is given to those who are just above the minimum wage, but are already scraping by without these increases started? Earning £50 above the lower income families is hitting the purse hard. Helen Angus: we are just over the threshold with dual income and we've cut back on so much. We're scraping by. We get no government help. We live in a new build house. It's energy efficient. The government stipulated that, yet they're still charging an arm and a leg. How does he expect working families to live and survive? And Sam Sage: full-time employed, single female, earning £18,000 a year. What help will I and others in the same situation get? They know they're getting the £400, Chancellor, but if you're on £18,000 and you're only getting £400 or £550 with the council tax perhaps, then a £1,500 a year rise on energy alone when everything else is going up is still pretty close to unaffordable.
So I think I'm glad you acknowledged that, because it's not right to say that people are getting no help. And actually, most people in that situation will be getting £550 of support from the government over the course of this year.
But it's a £1,500 rise.
They would have got £150 through the council tax rebate, and now £400 in October. And I think, as you've rightly said, we should concentrate as much as we can on the people who are most in need, accepting that no government and no chancellor could sit here and say we can solve the problem for everyone. I would be lying if I said I could, and anyone who pretends that we can is not being straight with people. So it's right that we prioritise on those who are most in need, but we do, as I said, have a universal support in place with £550. And I actually, there's lots of other things we'll do that will help the people that you just mentioned, because we raise the national living wage. We are raising the national insurance threshold in July to £12,500, meaning that person that you talked about is going to receive a £330 tax cut. That's what's going to happen, and that's starting in July. We cut fuel duty. We changed the universal credit taper for those people who are moving into work. So if you look at, for example, now everyone's got different circumstances. If you look at example for a single mother, I think you're one of the people you mentioned, single mother with 2 kids, if they're working full-time on the national living wage and renting, as a result of all the changes we are making to the tax system, the benefit system, the support we've put in place, that single mum is going to be better off by something like £2,500 this year, so to help them combat some of the rising bills that they're seeing. And that's the result of all the changes we've made. And so that's £2,500 extra they will have. And I'm not saying that is going to necessarily solve the entire problem, but it does mean that we are providing support to people in the circumstances you described, and that will help them meet both energy bills and other rising costs.
Now, Chancellor, I'm being wound up and limited on my time. I wanted to ask you about people with oil and LPG who aren't getting anything on the back of this one, and many of those are seeing huge price hikes. I wanted to talk to you about standing charges, so I'm just putting a nod in on those 2 factors. But if you forgive me, I've got 2 quick questions. Look, you put measures in place for this year, but the crisis in Ukraine could last longer, and the cost of living crisis could continue to go on. We're looking at prices in next April's price cap, and I know it's a long time away and we're not sure, still being very high. What happens next year? if nothing changes, can we expect people to get the same help again? That's my first question, then a final quick one after that.
So I think people can judge me by my actions over the time that I've had this job. I've always been responsive to the situation that the country's going through. I've always tried to act to support people where we can, make sure we help the most vulnerable, and do that in a way that is responsible and ensures that our country and our economy are strong in the long term. And I will continue to act that way. None of us know what energy prices are going to be next year. But what I can tell you now, and what people should be reassured by, is the way our system works, benefits and pensions next year are likely, subject to a review that has to happen legally, they are likely to go up by quite a significant amount, because the inflation rate that decides that is set in September. Now that's likely to be a relatively high inflation rate in September. So that's what will happen next year for everyone's benefits and pensions, and that increase is most likely to be significantly higher than the inflation that we will see next year on all the forecasts that are currently available. So that should give people an enormous sense of reassurance that we're providing the help today to help them get through to that point, and then actually next year there's going to be an enormous easing as all of their incomes go up considerably compared to what the increase in prices is.
Well, I'm sure we'll both find out through social media whether people feel reassured by that or not. Let me do my final question. Becky Jane on Facebook. Does the Chancellor appreciate the unnecessary worry and strain he has put on people's mental health by waiting so long to announce these measures? Until this week, he and the PM refused to even confirm more help would be coming. And that interlinks with another question I'm getting. And there's anger out there, I think. There are many people who've believed that you've done the announcement today as a fig leaf to cover up the Sue Gray report. For people who have been worried and panicked about this, doesn't it leave a slight ill taste in the mouth that this has come out on the back of the Sue Gray report?
Well, to Becky and others, I can categorically assure you that that had no bearing on the timing for us announcing the support. And I can give you my absolute assurance on that and my word. Now, the reason we acted today is because we had more certainty about what will happen to energy prices in the autumn. And I don't know whether it was you, Martin, or you were quoting someone. It's not right to say that we refused to say we would be providing more help. I actually said precisely the opposite. I said that in the spring, I said that in February, that of course we would look to provide more support if necessary. And that we could do that when we had a better sense of what would happen to energy prices. That's the single biggest thing driving the increase in the cost of living. And no one in February could tell me with any certainty what was going to happen to the price cap in October. And so I didn't want to say something that would prove to be wrong, right? I wanted to wait enough time so I had a sense of the scale of the problem, and then we could size our support appropriately. And that's what we've done. And actually the timing, you've heard from Ofgem this week about their expectation of what the price cap will be in October. And it's because of that that I know the scale of the challenge that people are going to face this year. And then I can decide what the right way to support them and in what size. That's what's influenced the timing. So, and the other thing I'd say is we have announced lots of support already, £21 billion worth between February and March to help people this year. Many of those things have already happened and more to come, but we've topped that up today. So there's in total £37 billion worth of support. That's really huge by, I think, any measure. Certainly internationally, it does look like that. And it is targeted on those most in need, but we recognise this as a challenge for everyone. So there's also a universal component to help everyone a bit. And whilst no Chancellor could solve every problem, I am doing my absolute best to make sure that the British people know that we are on their side through these challenging periods. We will stand by them as we always have, and I'm confident we will get through it.
Chancellor, thank you very much for your time today and for coming to answer the questions. It's only by putting the questions to you and a bit more practical than we perhaps get in the political sphere that people can make up their own mind on the package that you've announced today. Thank you for your time. Enjoy B&Q. I hope your DIY goes well.
Yes, good evening. Thanks very much.